What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Collision Live. It's me, Daniel, your host, and I'm joined at the desk, as I always am, by the Christmas decorations to my Walmart in October, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Well, not too much. I guess. Did you do that because did you have that already, or did you just see what I was wearing and what you were wearing?
We're bringing in the Christmas spirit.
Bringing in the cheer.
Yeah,
a couple
along
months
with
early.
Cracker Barrel and Walmart. Hey, it's never too early to have the decorations out. Just don't start listening to the music until December. Keep something.
At least till after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, keep some things sacred. But hey, we're glad you guys are joining us. Hope you guys found us here on our Wednesday. We've been doing, I don't know how long we've been doing the Collision Live. We've been doing it for a while.
It started. I think the first little bit was on a Monday, right? We did
we did it on Monday, and then we eventually moved it to Tuesday. Now we're on Wednesdays. Hey,
eventually, we're going to make it to Friday.
We'll be welcoming you to our Sunday live stream. Hey, it's just easier for our schedule and stuff. So we hope you will join us. Going forward, we will always be on a Wednesday. And hey, if you are joining us live, encourage you guys, join the conversation, jump in the comments section. We got some interesting stuff to talk about, just sort of pop culture and kind of as Christians, and also some controversial stories and dialogues and nostalgic pop punk from back in the day. So lots of good things to talk about. Real quick before we kind of jump into our stories, we got a crew. We are not the only ones here. How is our crew doing? We all kind of somewhat color coordinate except for Sam. How are you guys doing? You guys doing well?
We're doing great.
Yeah, we're doing great.
So good to be on a Wednesday. It was weird yesterday, just nothing.
I know.
No live stream.
I felt like the Will Smith GIF where he's just like looking around his empty apartment, all alone. Hey, what do I do? Where's my crew? And shout out to Joni for bringing in color in her hair. Speaking of pop punk rockers, but we got a lot of stuff to talk about. So why don't we kick things off like we always do with cultural conversations? So several things kind of going on this week. Interesting conversations, not really just newsy stories, but sort of wider kind of pop culture things that touch on wider conversations and issues and that I think as Christians is interesting to jump into. But before we get to those, there's also just the regular old-fashioned, just fun pop culture stuff. Marvel, the MCU, Wakanda Forever, the second Black Panther movie, the 58th MCU movie, whatever number we're on, is coming out. I think it's November 11th or 10th, early November. They just dropped I'm guessing the last trailer, or at least one of their last trailers for this. What are your thoughts? We both watched this.
It looks epic.
Looks good.
It looks really good, and I think there's something about this MCU that I think feels a bit more like the early days of MCU, maybe. I don't know. It seems like I would entertain watching this one versus I feel like most of the past dozen or so that just kind of seem, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it has I'm one of those, apparently one of the few, based on the box office, who's just sort of grown weary of the MCU and just superhero movies, and I still kind of see them because I review them, but I'm not invested, or how many more days till.
Yeah, I mean, Thor: Love and Thunder is out now on Disney Plus, and it's been out for a while, and I can't be bothered to.
Yeah, and you're not missing much. There's the thing about the Black Panther. I enjoyed the first one. This one just looks. I don't know. Maybe the trailers are deceiving. They're trying to sell it, but it looks a little more artfully made.
It just looks interesting. Yeah, and I wonder, is that? And we've talked about this before, and we won't have to belabor the point, but I feel like as these superhero movies narrow their scope, I feel like it makes the movie better. When it's the end of the universe,
there's a beam in the sky,
and it's we're all gonna die. But I think when it's focused in on no, our people, our tribe, our country, our slice of the world is affected, I think that allows the movie to be better.
And if
more
we go, then the whole world's endangered.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I'm sure there'll be some of that, obviously.
And I still think, in some ways, the more these films look in the rest of the MCU, that's the worst part of these movies at this point. The CGI of the guys flying, and it just looks like some just CGI spectacle, but sort of more like the cultural stuff looks interesting. What about crew? Are either one of you guys? Do you guys care about super? I feel like Joni probably just doesn't care at all about these sort of movies. But Steven, are you? Does this excite you at all, or are you just like, eh?
Well, I'm not a massive like you. Like I don't follow it completely, but I actually have not even seen Black Panther. So I feel like I've seen every other one except that one, and I'm like, I don't know why.
The man who never sees movies.
I know.
Add this to the list of films that Steven has never seen. So
And I'm like over here like, don't ask me, don't ask me, don't ask me.
What about you, Jody? Do you care at all? I feel like you probably don't.
I mean, I like adventures.
That's it.
well said.
Yeah, that's Joni's probably the nicest one of the four of us, and that's her way of saying that she doesn't care. But hey, maybe we'll force both them to see the new one. We can talk about that in a live stream. Speaking of a movie that I don't know if any of us will see, but there's definitely lots to talk about. We can jump into Blonde. This is the Netflix original movie on Netflix, telling like the biopic of Marilyn Monroe. And this thing was getting buzz like from the minute they announced it. Like I think intentionally, like the first announcement of it was like, and this is rated NC-17. Like this is going to be a very intentionally controversial, stir the pot. It was going to have like a lot of nudity and a lot of just content to do that. But I think some of like the conversations that came out of it, even controversies that people didn't anticipate. So there's been a bunch of conversations about this. I think different angles that whether or not this is, you're going to go see it as a Christian, go see some NC-17 rated film. I still think the conversations around this movie are interesting for Christians. And there's kind of two different angles. We can get into it for just a minute. I guess we don't want to spend tons of time on this, but one is this sort of the sexual exploitation of, it's sort of like the irony or the catch-22 or whatever you want to call it, of like, we're making a film to kind of show like the awfulness of like the sexual exploitation of this actress. And like in doing so, like we're kind of going to do that in the film. Like, kind of exploit sort of the new hit actress and do a bunch of stuff. So there's kind of that side of it of how do you deal with that. And then the unexpected part is, this is sort of being labeled now. There's like anti-abortion propaganda. There's a scene in this movie where Marilyn Monroe she has abortions. I think several scenes, and one of them she's like talking to the infant that's still in her belly and like having this conversation. It's this trippy, weird scene. But what do you have you followed any of the craziness going on? Or?
A little bit, but again, not very closely. I think it is interesting when it's like, the crossroads of like sexual exploitation and anti-abortion. Like never did we think that was gonna end up on the bingo card for this year, but I think that is something, especially sort of the irony of like we want to show just the brutality of this thing, and so this film is gonna have to be extra brutal. And whether it's, violence or, in this case, sexual exploitation, it's like, but we really want you to know just how sexually exploitative it is. And to do so, like, we're going to have to sexually exploit someone just to show you that, hey, this is really bad. And so that is sort of a weird thing, I think, for movies to do. Unfortunate.
And I would say too, as far as like I think that what's her name, the actress,
Ana de Armas.
Yeah,
I think.
Like I think she seems fully on board. So I don't think where she's being exploited. Like she's very much, supporting this. And from what it seems from interviews, I don't know her, but sort of the character, like the imagery of like they are kind of using her in like a very gratuitous or like a lot of nudity and using her sexuality very much front and center to sell a movie about how it was so wrong that people used her sexuality. And so there is sort of that side of it of like, hey, you're kind of doing what you're sort of the film is supposed to be kind of pushing back against. And like you said, I think the kind of the anti-abortion thing where it's just this is not the movie I thought we'd get that was like the anti-abortion film. Like there's not many films like
the Venn diagram of the content of this film. Like it's just such a small sliver that you would think there would be any overlap, but here we are.
But it is telling like the response towards this, where they're just, and again, like, even if you agree with some of the message, it doesn't necessarily mean it was well done. But it, just like the lack of openness for this for a character to struggle with, and again, like, obviously some of the stuff how they do that is maybe kind of weird and trippy, but like it's just like sort of the media and some of the stuff is like there's just let's tell stories but not this story, like not that aspect of
the unwillingness to have like nuance or a different perspective about abortion. I feel like is telling of like the industry as a whole. It's like we can be nuanced and progressive in every single area, but don't touch our choice, like a pro-choice stances. And so it's like if you do anything that sort of, smells of anti-pro-choice, then it's like, like we're gonna have to like cancel the film or something. You know what I mean? It's like there's this sort of that's pro-choice or abortion rights. It's in some ways, I think this reveals the sacred cow status, I think, of abortion rights, I think, in Hollywood.
Yeah, just that there is sort of some standard, I guess, that this expectation that films don't sort of explore this aspect of the situation. And even like the director, somewhere I pulled his quote, Andrew Dominici, I think, where he says, it's just people looking at the film through the lens of their own particular prejudices or whatever agenda they want to advance. I don't think it has anything to say about Roe versus Wade. And again, I think this director has a lot of stuff to say that I think is kind of weird. But I think the core of that, at least, is like is true, that people do, I think, are reading into like we are approaching films and like we want it to say this, and if it's not saying this, then it's wrong. Not it's just different. It's like they shouldn't do this. This is a bad movie because
well, I think it also. It's just, I think the nature of conversations about anything that is remotely nuanced is just very difficult to have in our social media culture right now. And I think you saw this with your review of Woman King. So it's like everybody's just like, it's such a sort of lightning rod for like your priors, like bringing in like your own perspective on whatever. And a movie like that sort of just highlights how you feel about different things. And so I think this is maybe another one where it's like, you can read into this, whatever it is that you're already bringing, whatever agenda you already have, you can bring to this film and sort of like wave your flag about it. And I think his comments on that are pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think I think we're all can be guilty of it, like wanting affirmation rather than just sort of openness of stories. But again, let us know if you guys have any thoughts on that, or if some of you have seen this movie, because we have not, or just however you're navigating sort of some of that. And kind of another story that kind of hits differently, hits back in that sweet nostalgic sweet spot. Paramore is back in the news. Crazy story about Paramore that I feel like I'm like one of their best friends or something. This is one of the rare cases where I can be like the snob that says like, I knew them before they were famous. Like, which apparently they were somewhat famous because it was at Warped Tour, but they were on like some small, like out of the way stage, and there's like 10 people watching them play, and then like we watched them, and then we came back later, and I don't think I met her, but like I met some of the band members, and they were like no one was talking to them, and they were like giving out. It was before even their first CD, so they just had these like 2-song samplers, and they're like, hey, check us out. And I was like, oh, cool, we'll check it out. We'll be sure to check you out. I hope you guys do well. And then
good luck.
So I'm sure they were
I bet they remember that.
I bet that was a pivotal moment in their life. But one thing that maybe they've tried not to remember is some of the lyrics in some of their it's not their debut album, their hit Riot, their second album that kind of catapulted them into fame. So this the Misery Business, made famous by the plagiarism of Olivia Rodrigo recently, but one of their kind of their breakout song, and sort of like basically a pop punk diss track to this other girl they're fighting over the same guy or whatever. But it has the lyrics in the song where it says in the second verse, second chances, they don't ever matter. People never change. Once a whore, you're nothing more. I'm sorry, that will never change. And so obviously she wasn't feeling great about this rival of hers. But this song's had become controversial. I think about 4 years ago, if I remember the story right.
Yeah,
They kind of
sounds
announced
about
that,
right.
hey, there's people complaining about it. It was anti-feminist. That they were referring to saying mean things about another female. So they kind of axed the song from their set list, even though it's their most popular song. And I think just like yesterday or like 2 days ago, they like brought it back to life, and like now they're gonna perform it. And she kind of gave us a talk in the middle of like the song, kind of explaining why they're singing the song that she wrote when she was 17. But what is your takeaway from this? Because there's some of her quote we can get into too. But
Yeah.
I feel like it touches on bigger issues beyond just Paramore.
Yeah, and we've talked about some of this before with like Beyonce and Lizzo sort of changing their lyrics or pulling down old tracks from streaming services. But I think to me it's interesting because I think if it's hard to say because obviously I've never been in that situation that Paramore's been in, but you would think if they just sort of explained like sort of stood their ground on the if they really did, like, I guess the thing is like it sounds like they didn't really have much conviction about it in the first place because they were willing to not play it for a while.
Cool. Because here's sorry to enter, just to butt in. Because I feel maybe here's the quote that she got. Because I think this is what you're getting at, where she says, and I think this is in the speech she was giving. Said 4 years ago we said we were going to retire this song for a little while, and I guess technically we did, but what we did not know was that just about 5 minutes later, after I got canceled for saying the word whore in a song, all of TikTok decided it was okay. And then the article says, and then they launched into the song, and everyone cheered, and everyone was happy about the song. But I think that touched like the conviction aspect.
Yeah, it's sort of like, well, like if you didn't feel like it was, like stand up for your art, I guess would be sort of my admonishment to artists. And again, saying that as someone who isn't an artist and is probably never going to be in a situation to stand up for anything I create, but so I know it's easier said than done, but I think something like this where like I don't see there being anything problematic about the lyric other than maybe it's harsh language, but it's like she wasn't she wasn't using that pejorative for all women, herself being a woman. It's like so what like how is that anti-feminist? And so I think if maybe a counterfactual would be if you just said, hey, I was really mad at this chick for stealing my guy. What of it?
Yeah, and
then I
was
think
17.
yeah,
a literal teenager.
Yeah.
Because I think there's two aspects to this that I think are interesting. One is like hey, and we realized that like TikTok gave the old stamp of approval, and I guess it's okay if TikTok says like just how much influence, sort of that kind of the silly like the outragey TikTok shallow like.
Yeah,
the police on like TikTok that like
or social media at large, but in this case TikTok,
social media that like that I feel like creates these sort of false narratives of like, where like, hey, was anyone really bothered by it? Like again, like you said, other than just hey, that's a harsh word, we don't like harsh words in our songs, but like in like the sense that like the outrage is about. So like I feel like that's part of it, and then like the other part of it for me that I think is interesting is just I feel like there's this sort of this lack of willingness to have things kind of represent like certain emotions or feelings that aren't consistent with like the ideal, like because like you see that with like trying to like redo like movies like Disney movies and changing them, or like trying to change words, like other artists have done that of like hey, this represented how I felt at the time, not saying that that's even the right way, it's just that was my expression of it, like I feel like at some point like you can't just constantly go back and like, well, now we don't think that, or now this isn't okay, or as a 35-year-old, I wouldn't say this, so we need to not do that song. And like,
well, I think it sort of speaks to the lack of grace in our society, and maybe this is an indication that the next generation is a little less uptight about people's changing feelings over time, and I think. Like if you can't change your mind or change your thoughts on something over like a decade and a half, like then what's the point really? Like we're not all just gonna sit around and whitewash our our history. And so I think hopefully things like this will provide a turning point for just the overall like need, I think, for social media to try and go in and correct everything in the past, and hopefully it's also just a signal to artists to to stand up more for the art that they produce, and know, is that exactly how you feel today? Well, no, probably isn't, but like, you wrote that, it was a hit song, like, can that be okay, and just move on from it? And so I think, I don't know, hopefully it's
like the acceptance that, like, as humans we are not always line up exactly in every
No,
moment with
and-
like
yeah,
what
and it's just-
society at large or whatever the narrative is.
And it's just a really weird sort of standard to have anyways, because it's like, well, even in the last year that has changed on certain issues. And so it's like, well, like that seems like such a recipe for just total chaos and disaster, and not any way to live your life. And I think too, like, I would be interested to know, like, who are the people that are like pushing back against these songs, like Beyonce's lyric. Like, is that like her publicist is saying maybe we should change this lyric? Is that like her manager? Is it, a handful of people on social media coming after her? So it's like, part of me thinks that there isn't really that much outrage, but it's like, because outrage is the thing to do, it's like it kind of gets some steam, and people love a good pile on. And so like, no one cares about it, but like, they'll pile on because, hey, I'm bored and on Twitter.
Well, it's funny because even like in the article, it's just like, then they started playing the song and like everyone was all excited, and like it's like, I feel like no one really cared. Like,
No, that would be my suspicion, is no one actually cared.
but I do think it is an interesting, just as far as, because I feel like there just keeps seeing more and more stories like that, as far as like, what do we do with like the past, maybe in like a general sense, but like just sort of art, or like, is there room for us to like express things that aren't just like the talking points of how we wish things were. I think we'll skip. We were going to talk about The Bros, the movie, the kind of the box office, the dismal disaster that was. But I feel like there is some interesting stuff in that whole discussion. So maybe we'll punt that to next week so that we have more time to kind of get into it. One other crazy before we get into, which I know is probably going to be the highlight of my episode of Sam's Host Corner, a crazy Paramore fact that I found when I was like looking at the story. You know the song "This Is Amazing Grace"? Like that, "This is Amazing Grace."
Yeah.
Do you know that the Paramore guitarist co-wrote that song?
No idea.
Or ex-guitarist. I think there's the two brothers and her were like the band, and then they left. I think they were more Christian, and I don't know how she associated with, like, I don't think she was as much on board with the Christian stuff, and so they left, and it was a big messy breakup. But I was like, one of these like worship songs written by Paramore guitarist, so I thought that was cool.
That's pretty hardcore.
That's your fact of the day. But speaking of things that I'm sure will be just as interesting, if not more, the next segment on our show, we have Host Corner.
Well, being that it's been a bit of a hectic week for me, I've reached into the archives, pulled out something that's I've been enjoying lately. It's sort of a break from social media, and it's a mobile app game called The Battle of Polytopia. And yes, it looks glorious, and it is as glorious as it looks. And I would say it's one of those games that is obviously addictive, but you can play it over time. And if you've ever played Civilization, then this is Civilization like simplified and with way more colorful graphics. And there's several different like gameplay modes, and you can even do like multiplayer, so you can play with your friends. I don't do that because I don't have any friends. I just play the computer, and it's super fun. And you can like choose how many opponents you want and explore and build your civilization. And I don't know, but it's like they've kind of nailed the heuristics of it, and and sort of the colors and just the simplicity of it. And so it's a super fun game. It's free to play. You should play it.
So is this? I feel like maybe I've asked you this before. Like, is this free to play as though like you can play for 5 minutes? And then
No. It's
give us your bank card, and if you want to play.
No. It's free to play. Like I think you can unlock like different, because you start out as like there's like maybe 4 tribes that you can be, and then there's like a whole list of other ones that you could purchase, and each one has like this one starts out with like horses, or this one starts out with certain advantages, just like in Civilization or in Command and Conquer, although that's slightly different, but like you know, everyone has sort of their advantage or disadvantage, and but yeah, no, you can play it. You know, there's not like because I think I've played Civilization on mobile before, and it's like you only have like a limited number of turns, and then you can go no further unless you pay. But this one you can go as long as you want to. So
Say,
it's fun.
Polytopia is poly like a person, or is it like poly because they're like polygon? Like,
I think
is
it's probably
there-
like multiple.
like what's the mythology, the lore?
I don't know. I'll have to. I should have.
Do a deeper
had I planned better for this, I would have given you the lore behind it. But I think it's more like multiple kingdoms kind of thing, civilizations.
Say, if you guys just need something to waste your life doing, find Polytopia or the battle for Polytopia, even more intense. But you know something else that I think we should probably all be doing as Christians, and that is engaging with pop culture. So this is kind of our main conversation for the. I think Joni is showing that I think she's already.
She's already downloaded
already
it.
got
and
it.
We will
Yeah.
commence to start a multiplayer game here right after we.
If
go
some
off
of our
here.
camera transitions are a little slow, it's because Joni is taking over the world in Polytopia. But this is kind of for our main conversation. I thought we get into. It's kind of in some ways it's just like a general. It's sort of like the foundation of what we do here, like the engagement with pop culture. I almost said engagement with Polytopia. No, not that.
Yes, which is we're gonna pivot now and live gameplay coming at you.
Yeah, we'll become a Twitch channel pretty soon with Polytopia. But kind of keeping up, like we keep up with the stories and trying, what's going on as Christians. How do we approach this? How do we understand this and like, contribute to that? So that because we kind of haven't for a while. Maybe take a step back a bit and kind of like why should we as Christians I feel like there is sort of this stigma of like pop culture is bad and like we speak of Hollywood like it's like this one person that's a bad guy like he's like Sauron or something like sort of like a very like us versus them like Christians just should have very little to do, and if they do like the conversation tends to be very much like you can dip your toe in but like don't step too far.
Yeah.
This is very, very dangerous and all that conversations. And some of those are good conversations. But kind of, I guess from like a positive sense, like why as Christians, like we're commissioned by Jesus to go in the world and all this stuff. Like why would pop culture and keeping up with these stories and caring have any place like in our calling or activity? Like, what are some of your initial like, should we care? Are we just wasting our time, or what do you?
I mean, I think you should care. I think up to a point. I think obviously, as with anything, you can maybe care too much and get too sort of just sucked into the whole pop culture and just obsessing over all maybe the wrong things and it sort of taking over your life. But you could do that with anything, and so like maybe that's not really the point. But I think the reason you should care is because, I think everything is downstream of culture, and so in a broader sense, like pop culture is sort of at the forefront of sort of where a culture is going, and I think you see things in pop culture before you would see them, let's say in laws or sort of accepted norms in a society. Typically come about as a result of what's happening in pop culture, and I think that's if you give up in a sense pop culture, then you can expect to also be giving up sort of social norms that maybe you once held dear that are no longer in vogue, and so I think at the core is why you should care about pop culture maybe.
Yeah, I feel like pop culture is. I think even like recently, it feels like it's even like amplified maybe. Where like if you just sort of think of all the major like societal like conversations or issues or debates or like norms changing or pushback and like all that kind of stuff, like all of it filters through pop culture. Like all of it, like all those discussions, like even like maybe it's because like I think through each week for doing this live stream, like what are we going to talk about and like. If we wanted to, we could almost talk about anything going on in culture just through pop culture. Like, and we tend to like steer away from like the political stuff and focus more on like entertainment and that for this show. but like we could talk about all these different things because I think like the pop culture, kind of the way I've said it before is like it's like both like an incubator and like a mirror, where like in some ways like it just reflects the way that our culture is. Like it's a way to understand and kind of see the values and kind of even like in the movie reviews I do, I try and do that. Like, what does this tell us? You know, not like the moral of the story is like, you know, be nice to people. It's like, what does this tell us about like the way our society sees things or is processing things? So it kind of like reflects it, but I think it also like creates it. Like it's also like you can kind of see like a glimpse into sort of like where we're going by the sort of things that are kind of getting you know, worked out through the arts. And I feel like both of those kind of values of it as a Christian are important. Like if we're called to like reach the world and be in the world and like make a difference in it, like understanding the world and like seeing kind of where things are going, like both those aren't things I think as Christians like we should just not care about.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing to realize is that, you know, you have the greatest impact when you're, you know, impacting the culture, and I think that's why, you know, we advocate for Christians to be involved in the making of pop culture, whether that's, you know, TV shows, movies, music, all the rest of it. And so I think you know, that's not something to shy away from. And I think you see that, like, if you do, then you sort of just kind of give up on it, and you're constantly fighting that culture. And so I think you can see this a lot just in how, let's say, a lot of maybe the older generation in church sort of rails against Hollywood now. And it's like, well, we've sort of given up on Hollywood, and so now all you're doing is attacking it for, like, imposing its will on, you know, the next generation. And I think that raises the question. It's like, so what were we doing to influence Hollywood rather than just totally pull away from it and then be mad at it when it's acts godless, because it is. And so there's this push and pull with Hollywood. And I think some of that is just that to be involved in it, there is nuance, there is messiness. And so I think oftentimes we just want sort of simple, clear, you know, you can do this, you can't do that. And so, like, you know, it's better to just unplug completely and, you know, go off grid rather than like stay involved and sort of work through those messiness.
Yeah, and I feel like some of the
and messiness like, is a word.
Messiness is like, I guess one of like the consequences too, like we talk about like cultural like engagement, because I think that's like you're in it, like you're not just sort of only an outside observer. Like, it doesn't mean that you're like, you know, can you even follow Jesus if you don't watch every Marvel TV show and catch all the Easter eggs? Like, you know, are you really fulfilling your, like, it's not that kind of investment where it's just like, not just like you have to be a consumer of pop culture in order, like, it's more just like, I guess, like listening and like observing and like thinking through and like just sort of seeing, because like I know because of what we do, like the collision, like, and people send stuff or like ask questions and things, like I just see a lot of people taking like the very wrong lessons from, not that I always have the right lesson, like takeaways, but like clearly it's people that like, hey, this happened, and like there's someone that doesn't really, obviously isn't very like plugged into sort of what's going on in culture, and like, so like what might seem like, we saw that with like the R-rated movies, like clearly society doesn't want them, or like the what's the Chris Pratt show, that the train, like the what's this show that
the Terminal List?
The Terminal List, like some of that, like, you know, clearly this, and like we're like a lot of those, if you sort of follow pop culture and sort of the industry and this what's going on, and some of the conversations, and you kind of listen to people from like that aren't just in your bubble about talking about these things too, like you see like, no, actually there's other things going on besides sort of the headlines that you kind of see, you know, maybe on like a political site or somewhere that's not even a pop culture entertainment, that I feel like you end up sort of like aiming towards the wrong things, right? Assuming things about people, rather than kind of taking it as a chance to like actually understand people, or like this is society, or. Well,
I think your ire gets misplaced, you know, when you're sort of, when you do like talk about something in pop culture or engage with pop culture, it's usually through that filter of like, wait a second, they're coming for our kids, like. And then you just completely miss what's actually important in certain events or instances. And so I think, again, that's why I think to be engaged and to be a little more thoughtful about how you connect with culture, and I guess maybe ultimately just try to abstain from just sort of reacting to things that you hear. And it may be that you should be outraged or upset about something, but like before you go and like do your rant based on a headline that you read, like what is actually going on here, and how should you process that before you just kind of jump on the bandwagon of hating Disney for X, Y, and Z reason, or whatever it is. It's like, read about it, try and get outside your own sphere, and make sure that the way that you're seeing an issue or an event is actually making sense and in line with what you believe, and not just sort of like, hey, this is a point for our team, so let's rally the troops sort of mentality I think that often pervades in these circles.
Yeah, so where you just approach like pop culture as entertainment stuff like merely as like fodder for the culture war.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this will work if we just sort of ignore this and use this to like argue this point. One of the verses that I was thinking about kind of in again, it's not, Jesus wasn't speaking about pop culture in the verse, but again where he does his like final prayer for his disciples in John 17, where he says, "You have given I've given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I am not asking that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world." And kind of go throughout that whole, and the prayer goes on, but like, throughout that whole thing, he keeps sort of like juxtaposing like they're not of the world, but like
they're in it.
They're in the world, like, and that's sort of where we get like the catchy slogan of like we're in the world, but not of it. But I think the application of that is that like you have to learn to be in the world. Like you have to learn to, we shouldn't be shocked then if we're called out of the world. We shouldn't be shocked that like, the world around us is different.
Yeah.
The stories that they tell or the way they work out issues, like that shouldn't be shocking. I feel like if it is shocking, then you maybe need to like open your eyes a bit more to like to sort of the sort of stuff that's going on. But I feel like again that verse wasn't specifically like therefore go to the Greek theater and watch the raunchy plays. Like that wasn't what he was talking about. But just the fact that like we are in the world, because I feel like especially with like pop culture, we still need to like worry about holiness and like the content and stuff. Like I feel like as the church, a lot of times our response is very much like we're not of the world and we're really not in the world either. Like we like take a few things, seeds over there, and we grow our own thing over here so that we don't have to listen to what the world's saying or the issues. Like we can just sort of talk about what we want to talk about.
Yeah, and I think the way that sort of works itself out is you end up having, Christians talking to, let's say, the world in a way that just like you're just talking past each other, and so you're not able to engage with those souls that are being impacted by the world. And I think that's sort of what it comes down to. It's like, well, now you're just sort of you're saying all these things from your out of the world perspective that just is not landing and is not making sense to someone who is in the world. And I think at the end of the day, like you need to be able to communicate to people in the world first before you can communicate the gospel. And so I think again, not to be like, oh, I'm just going to go immerse myself and I'm doing the Lord's work, but watching all these horrible movies. But it's really just about knowing the issues that should be addressed or talked about, or the deeper philosophical implications of some of these things, rather than just like, yeah, but what about this movie that's coming for our kids. And that I think it's a complete miss, I think, when it comes to some of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think even just like, and that's why I feel so like sad that so much of like the cultural discussion because of social media has become very much like fitting things into camps.
Yeah.
Like where, oh, well, this is one of our movies. If you don't like this movie, then clearly you're not one of us. And like, because I feel like it also, or it used to be, and I think it still is to a degree, like it is like a common ground of like, in like a culture that like doesn't seem to have very much common ground. Like it can be like a, hey, or it used to be like, but we all like the original Star Wars movies. Like we all have this like bond of like, we all think this is just a great, we all loved Top Gun. Like, you vote this way, you believe this, you believe in this God, like all that stuff. But like Top Gun Maverick was pretty awesome. Like there is sort of
Yeah.
some level where we can connect in that way. But hey, let us know if you guys think how have you guys seen that pop culture is being just being valuable. You know, not necessarily mean like pop culture is like the highest priority for Christians.
Yeah.
But I do think it is a priority. And I think especially if we're kind of going to be trying to navigate and just sort of live in like this jungle of our culture and kind of as we're set apart, like I think Christians do have somewhat of an obligation to like just be aware of it and like in an honest kind of good faith way that's not just like cherry picking what they want and like, but it's just like tell your stories, let me kind of learn from it, let's have these conversations. So let us know how you guys have done that. But kind of final thoughts, anything going on this week or anything?
Well, I did see that there was the poster of Chris Pratt as Mario, and I think maybe there was some leaked audio of his Mario voice. I maybe saw.
I think they're now. I
don't know when it
like
comes out.
today or tomorrow or something. They're gonna do something.
So that should be fun. Speaking of common ground, like we can all agree that Mario is great, but who knows what this movie is gonna be?
Yeah, probably be.
It's probably
not my Mario.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be crazy stuff.
But I think it'll be fun.
I did see too. Will Smith has a new movie. Did you see that? Like it's funny. It's all his. He's like, Will Smith's canceled from his slap, and no one can stop talking about his one moment of failure. And then it's like, now he released a new movie that's already like Oscar bait, kind of like like for all we know, he's gonna end up winning the award next year too. And like relive the moments. It's funny that some of the like reactionary of like his career is done, he'll never recover.
Except
like
he's still Will Smith.
Yeah, people move on. People have short-term memory. Anything else going on this week for?
I think that's it.
And what about the crew? Any final thoughts from any words of wisdom or things going on this week for you guys?
Not too much this week. It's been kind of a long week, and we got a long weekend. It's got family coming, so.
Yeah, this will be a crazy week. Again, my grandmother passed away, so we'll be having her funeral in 4 days on Sunday, which is sad, but the positive silver lining is a bunch of families coming in, so that will be good. But again, it has been a crazy week. But any final words of wisdom, or do you not have? Are you? All
I don't.
wisdomed
Yeah,
out?
I'm all wisdomed out. I was gonna get something and I forgot. So
He's gonna pull that quote, and then he had one more civilization kingdom to conquer in Polytopia, so he didn't get around to that. I want to thank you guys for joining us. Hope you'll join us next week as we talk about. I'm sure there'll be a lot of stuff to get into. So encourage you guys, jump in the comment section. Let us know and again, let us know if there's things you guys see happening in culture you want us to talk about. Send that our way. But thanks for joining us, guys. Stay safe and continue to collide through the world for Christ.